Before we begin this story, if you've ever felt like you didn't belong in a place called family, this is for you. If you've ever walked into a room where everyone laughed and talked, as if you were just a blurry part of the background, stay until the end. And don't forget to follow the channel so every time we uncover a piece of truth, you're the first to hear it. At least this time Nora showed up. She's usually more present on postcards than in real life. The words landed like a drop of red wine on a white tablecloth, jarring, undeniable, and sure to leave a stain. The dinner table paused for a beat, then ripples of chuckles spread like waves. I sat at the far end of the long table as usual, far from the center of attention. Delilah, my older sister, held her head high, her lips curving into that familiar, triumphant smile. The pearl necklace around her neck gleamed under the warm, golden light of the upscale restaurant on the outskirts of Boston. Around us, the clink of forks on plates, the pour of wine, the soft jazz in the background, all trying to smooth over something that was cracking. I didn't respond, not because I had nothing to say, but because I knew I didn't need to. There are moments when silence is the strongest rebellion. And this time I wasn't here to beg for understanding. I was here to close a chapter of my life. My name is Nora Callahan. I'm 35 years old. I'm a lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force, currently part of a high-level tactical training program for female pilots in NATO. But to my family, I'm just the sister who's rarely around. The celebration was for my mother's 60th birthday held at Cypress Grove, an upscale restaurant known for private events. Everything was perfect napkins folded into swans, flickering candlelight white-gloved waiters, and menus embossed on thick paper. But that perfection was a veneer because underneath everything was the same. I was seated next to a distant relative with an empty chair beside me that no one explained. Delilah, as always, was the center of every conversation. She talked about the family photo shoot in matching outfits, the edible gold leaf on the cake, her son's upcoming election as class president. I listened, but didn't really hear. I was used to this. Used to the point where being invisible became a kind of presence. Delilah always knew how to make people laugh, but she also knew how to make me feel small. Like a skilled puppeteer, she controlled the room's atmosphere with remarks that seemed harmless, but were laced with barbs. So what does Nora do again? Oh, right, something with planes, isn't it? Have you flown one yet? Or do you just sit in an office? The table laughed, a polite social chuckle. I gave a courteous smile, my hand still on my glass of water. I'd learned to shrink myself like a survival mechanism. In the military, I'm a leader. Here, I'm an extra seat. I remembered a familiar image. I was 7, and Mom was cutting the birthday cake. Delilah got the corner piece with sugar flowers and thick frosting. I got the middle piece plain unadorned. Back then, I just stared at the 2 plates. Not jealous, not angry. Just aware for the first time some starring roles are chosen early. Now my eyes drifted to Mom. She was smiling at a distant aunt. She wore a lavender dress, pearl earrings, her hair neatly pinned. Dad sat beside her quiet, as always, occasionally nodding or pouring wine for someone. I wondered if they ever truly saw me. I wasn't here to cling to anything. When I got the invitation, thick cardstock gold embossed lettering, formal attire please, RSVP, I almost declined. But then I received a message. Updated documents from General Dorsey would be hand-delivered to me that day per strict protocol by a designated officer. And that day coincided with tonight. I'd informed my unit send the documents to my hotel near the venue, but General Dorsey replied simply, "Lieutenant Reyes will deliver in person." My regards. It wasn't a coincidence. It was an opportunity. A chance to be present not in my old role, but as everything I'd become. I sat quietly watching the glass of water in front of me. The dinner flowed like a rehearsed play. Small talk compliments on the food, flowery thanks. No one asked about my work, my life, or the last time I flew across borders in a special training mission, and I no longer expected them to. Until a waiter approached the table, bowing slightly. "Excuse me, Ms. Callahan, someone is waiting for you in the lobby." "A scheduled delivery?" Everyone stopped. All eyes turned to me. Delilah raised an eyebrow. "Delivery? What's that? Did you order roses for yourself or something?" I set down my napkins, stood, and smoothed my dress. "No, just documents. I'll be right back." The click of my heels echoed on the marble floor, each step steady and deliberate. I turned toward the reception area, where the light was softer, easier on the eyes, and there at the main entrance, standing like a bronze statue, was Lieutenant Reyes. He was in full Air Force uniform, white gloves, polished shoes. When he saw me, he snapped to attention, saluted, and spoke in a clear voice. "Lieutenant Colonel Callahan. Documents secured per protocol. General Dorsey sends his respects." I stood tall, returning a crisp salute. Something in me softened like a taut bowstring, finally released after years of tension. I took the documents, nodded slightly. "Thank you, Lieutenant." "You're dismissed." "Yes, ma'am." He waited until I turned back inside, walking through the main corridor, where eyes from the dining room still followed. I felt the shift in the air. Something had changed, even if no one said it aloud. I returned to the table, sat down, and placed the documents in my bag. I smiled lightly. "Sorry for the interruption. What was Delilah saying? Something about towels and real estate." But no one spoke. Delilah pursed her lips. Mom shifted in her chair. Dad poured more wine into an already empty glass. No one touched the dessert. And that was just the beginning. Before this chapter began, if you've ever been the quiet child at your own party, if you've watched others take the spotlight while you remained a shadow, stay with me. You're not alone. And if you see a piece of yourself in this story, don't forget to hit follow. Every interaction is a silent nod that says we see each other. I still remember clearly my 7th birthday, the first time I invited friends over. Mom made a big cake covered in white frosting, sprinkled with colored sugar and delicate sugar flowers at the corners. When she cut it, the first piece, the corner with the flower and thickest frosting, went to Delilah. Everyone nodded. The eldest gets priority, of course. I got the middle piece, flat, undecorated. I didn't cry. I just looked at the 2 plates and understood that some things don't need explaining. Sometimes favoritism isn't in words, but in how the knife falls. From a young age, Delilah was always the star. She was pretty smart, quick-witted, and knew how to charm adults. Whenever guests came over, Mom would call her out to recite poetry dance a little, or show off her math grades. If I was there, I was usually in a corner sketching planes on scrap paper, carefully line by line. Once I showed Dad a drawing of a plane model I'd designed. It was my first attempt at sketching foldable wings with a pencil, based on a simple engine from a library book. He glanced at it, gave a faint nod. "Huh, a girl into that stuff? Why not try drawing dolls?" There was no malice in his words. I knew that. But the way they pushed me out of the shared space, out of connection, that was something only I noticed. Mom was always gentle, but her affection was like a spotlight. It always shone in the right direction, and I wasn't there. When Delilah won Outstanding Student, her photo was enlarged, framed, and hung in the living room. I had certificates too, but smaller, pinned temporarily to the fridge next to the grocery list. I didn't demand. I didn't resent. Instead, I found a way to make my world a place where I was the protagonist. I read about Amelia Earhart, the woman who dared fly across oceans when only men were trusted. I collected plane photos, taping them to my bedroom walls. I built models from cardboard, mixed my own paint. No one asked what I was doing, but I didn't need their questions anymore. I answered myself. One winter evening, I sneaked into the backyard with a handmade model plane. It was cold, but the sky was crystal clear. I looked up and whispered, "One day, I won't be down here anymore." Meanwhile, Delilah was taught by Mom how to apply blush-chose prom dresses. At 13, went to the salon for her first haircut. I sneaked old newspapers from Mom to use as a drop cloth for painting models, only to be scolded for making the room smell. She didn't hate me. She just never understood why a girl would dream of being in the sky. In middle school, I was selected for a district science fair with a project on aerodynamics. I won 2nd place. At the award ceremony, I held my certificate, scanning the audience for a familiar face. No one was there. Mom was busy taking Delilah dress shopping for the school festival. That night, I taped my certificate to my bedroom wall. I said nothing. I'd learned to keep my joy to myself. I didn't grow up with anger. I grew up with silence. But it was the kind of silence that erodes you bit by bit. The kind of absence that makes you feel like a nameless shadow in a brightly lit room. At 16, I secretly signed up for a summer pre-military training program for teens interested in the Air Force. When I got the acceptance letter, I jumped for joy. When I showed it to Mom, she frowned. "Are you serious? Other girls are preparing for college, picking majors like economics or law." I said I want to fly. She set the letter down as if it wasn't important enough to hold longer. Dad said nothing, just kept reading the paper. I went to that summer camp. Alone. 3 weeks at the training base were 3 weeks where I was called by name. Shared meals with teammates learned to check a simulated cockpit trained to land in emergencies. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. When I came back, no one asked if I'd enjoyed it. Mom just said, "Wash your clothes carefully, don't get oil on the blankets." I quietly unpacked, folded my camp shirt, cleaned my shoes. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote the first line. "Tomorrow I'll study to get my pilot's license." I didn't know how long it would take, but I knew one day I'd be called Lieutenant Colonel, and no glance or snide remark could erase that. Delilah never knew I wrote those words, just as she never knew how many times I folded my sketches when guests came over, or how many times I skipped outings to build models. She didn't need to know. That was my world. A world where I didn't need anyone's permission to exist. At that birthday dinner when she said I was only present on postcards, I wasn't hurt. I just thought even her mockery comes from a lazy memory. She never knew where I'd been, because she never asked. But maybe that was about to change. Have you ever achieved a dream, only to realize no one in your family cared? If you felt that you're in the right place. And if you want to walk this journey with me, don't forget to hit follow. Because here, every chapter is a step back to move forward. When I earned my pilot's license at 21, I imagined Dad standing up from his desk, Mom hugging me tight, and Delilah saying something unexpected like, "Wow, you actually did it," but there was no applause. No one met me at the airport. When I got home, suitcase in hand, my uniform still crisply folded, Mom just said, "You're back. Come eat your dad reheated the soup." I didn't blame them. I was just a beat too slow to set my suitcase down. The first time I flew a T-6 Texan II was during a training flight. When we took off, I wasn't scared. I felt chosen. For the first time, I was exactly where I belonged, in front of the control panel headset on eyes on the sky. I flew well. Not out of arrogance, it's just true. I learned theory, quickly handled situations well, and my reflexes in emergencies were reliable. In my second training cycle, I was nominated as flight group leader. 3 men, 1 woman, me leading. No one objected. In that environment, precision mattered more than gender. I graduated early from the Air Force Academy with outstanding evaluations. A female major once told me, "Callahan, you fly like you were born for the sky." I carried that like a shield. But every time I came home every few months, if I got leave, that world vanished as if it never existed. I became the second daughter again. The one no one remembered where she went or what she did. Once I printed a photo of me shaking hands with a Canadian female general in front of a military jet. I framed it carefully, placed it on the dining table for Christmas. Mom looked at it, smiled. "Oh, lovely dear, have you seen the stroller Delilah's planning to buy? It's on sale." I smiled, nodded. Inside me was a locked room where emotions were stored, never leaking out. One day while I was training in the Mojave Desert, I got a message Delilah had her second baby mom and she are at the hospital. Try to visit soon. No one asked where I was. I replied, in the desert. 46 degrees. Can't make it. The message was seen. No response. In moments like that, I turned to my team. There I was, Lieutenant Callahan. People trusted me, followed me. I woke at 4 a.m. to check systems, flew with trainees in extreme weather, spoke little, did much, and no one asked me to smile when I wasn't happy. When I was promoted to Lieutenant Colonel at 34, a notable milestone, I didn't tell my family. I told my unit. That night, I bought a small cake, lit a candle, closed my eyes, and I wish I'd stop expecting them to see me. And then I did stop. I built my own world. A small apartment near the base walls lined with photos from real flights. A wooden shelf for models I built. A personal library corner with books on flight control air traffic maps, and a thick notebook where I wrote things I'd never say aloud. That world had no one else's voice, but it was full. Because I got to be me. Not the compared version, not the other sister. Just Nora, who loved the sky and didn't need anyone's approval to fly. Once I came home for Delilah's backyard barbecue. Everyone wore matching outfits, kids ran around, music played from a Bluetooth speaker. I arrived, got handed a light beer, and was left by the salad table. A friend of Delilah's asked what I did. I said aviation training. She nodded. "Oh, like a flight attendant," I smiled. Close enough. No need to correct. No need to prove. At some point, you realize some things can't be forced into understanding. You can only choose where you're understood. I used to think my family would see me when I succeeded. Turns out they only saw me when I stayed still. when I became something that didn't disrupt their familiar rhythm. But I don't stay still anymore. I'm flying, and from up high, everything on the ground looks so small. You know, there are moments that seem small but crack what people call family bonds. A remark, a glance, a silence at the wrong time. If you've ever swallowed a response because you knew it wouldn't matter, keep walking with me. And if you see yourself in this story, hit follow, so I know I'm not telling it alone. I never planned to wear my uniform home. Not because I was ashamed of my career, but because I knew the looks it would draw when I walked through the door. But that Thanksgiving 5 years ago was an exception. I'd just finished a long series of flight training, and my last civilian flight before the holiday barely made it. I didn't have time to change. When I stepped out of the car in the front yard, the clock struck 6:00 p.m. I adjusted my shoulder boards, straightened my sleeves, took a deep breath, and walked in. Delilah opened the door. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe, pausing at the name tag on my chest. That makes you look intimidating. Who are you trying to scare? I looked her in the eye, my voice oddly calm. It's called command presence. She laughed as if I'd told a dry joke, then turned back inside, leaving the door open behind her. I stepped into a room full of warmth from the kitchen, the oven, the chatter, but none of it reached me. Everyone was setting the table. Kids were laughing. Dad was checking turkey instructions on his phone. Mom was arranging bread in a basket. No one looked up when I entered. No one paused. I hung my cap on the rack, stood tall, resisting the urge to smooth my lapels. The smell of roasted turkey cinnamon from pumpkin pie, the clink of dishes. It was all too familiar. Too normal. Too foreign. Mom turned, saw me. "You're back. Wash your hands. We're about to eat." I walked through the hallway past the living room, catching my reflection in a glass frame, a stranger in a uniform no one in this house ever asked about. When I returned to the table, Delilah was in her usual spot next to Mom. My seat, as always, was by the bookshelf, where the light didn't quite reach. Dinner began. Mom said grace. Dad nodded silently. Plates were passed around. I spoke little, picked at my food, and no one asked about my absence over the past months. No one mentioned the uniform. It was as if the clothes I wore were as invisible as I was. Until a distant uncle looked up, perhaps noticing the silver glint of my shoulder boards, and asked Nora, "You're in the Air Force. What's your rank now?" Before I could answer, Delilah cut in. "She's flying all over the place like a swallow. Here, one moment gone the next. No one knows when she's back." The table chuckled. Lightly, but enough. I turned to my uncle, smiled. "Lieutenant, sir. Up for another promotion soon if all goes well." He nodded slowly, as if digesting a new word in an unfamiliar language. No one followed up. After dinner, I helped Mom with the dishes. She said softly, "Next time come earlier to change. Okay, that outfit, it makes you seem a bit distant." I kept washing the hot water, turning my hands red. I said, "Distant Mom." "I think it just shows exactly who I am." She went quiet. The next dish she scrubbed a little too hard, splashing water on her apron. That night I slept in my old room. The walls still bore faint tape marks where I'd hung plane photos. I lay in the dark, hearing laughter from the living room, where Delilah and Mom looked at grandkid photos on an iPad. I closed my eyes, imagining the roar of an F-16's engine from my last training flight. In the cockpit, no one teased me. No one diminished me. Every button, every gauge, every command mattered. Here I was, still just a daughter who went somewhere and came back. A shadow with a slightly different shape, but still a shadow. The next morning I woke. Early walked a lap around the front yard. The winter air was crisp, the smell of snow lingering. I stood looking at the bare trees along the road, thinking about how I once believed that if I tried hard enough they'd see me. But not everyone wants to see. Some choose not to look. Because looking means rethinking old assumptions. And change sometimes is scarier than misunderstanding. I went back inside, said goodbye to Mom. She gave me a quick hug, asked, "Next time is Christmas or New Year's?" I said, "Probably a while. My unit's got a deployment coming." She nodded. No more questions. Delilah saw me to the door. She smiled. "Wear something lighter next time." "Okay," Mom didn't say, but she's uneasy. "That outfit makes things heavy." I gave a small smile. "It doesn't make things heavy. It just gives you no reason to pretend you don't see me." Her smile faltered. I picked up my bag and walked away. On my collar, the small insignia still gleamed in the sunlight. That was the last time I wore my uniform home. But it wasn't the last time I chose to walk into a silent room and break it. Because sometimes you don't stay quiet anymore. Sometimes you walk in and let others see who you've become. Have you ever received an invitation without knowing if it's an ending or a beginning? Some invitations don't need an immediate answer. But when you nod, you can't go back the same. If you're ready to step into a room you once feared, keep following. And if you see yourself in these pages, don't forget to hit follow, so we can walk to the truth together. I received the invitation to Mom's birthday in early May in my mailbox, at the small apartment near the base. A cream-colored envelope sealed with red wax. Thicker, heavier, and glossier than any invitation I'd ever gotten. I knew it wasn't random. Before, occasions like this came via group texts, or worse, a missed call from Mom. "If you're free, swing by," but this time it was embossed cardstock stating clearly Eleanor Callahan's 60th birthday celebration. Venue, Cypress Grove. Formal attire. Please RSVP by the 10th. My name on the envelope wasn't misspelled, wasn't abbreviated, wasn't mistaken for Nola like before. I held the invitation, studied it for a few seconds, then set it on the table. I didn't rush to open it. I made coffee, turned on the radio, listened to a soft morning saxophone piece, but the envelope sat there like an object, emitting its own frequency. I wasn't angry. I wasn't touched. I just felt one thing: something was closing, and I would be the one to close it. I decided to go. Not to blend in. Not to prove I belonged. I would go to be present. For the last time. A week later, I got an internal memo. General Dorsey requested a review of tactical documents for the NATO Joint Training Program. There were updates needing urgent confirmation. The order was clear: classified documents to be delivered directly to the responsible officer, not via system, and the delivery date coincided with the party. I emailed the coordination office requesting a reschedule or delivery at the base. They replied the next day per General Dorsey's direct order. Lieutenant Reyes will deliver the documents to Lieutenant Colonel Callahan's location. No changes. Attached was a handwritten note: "The General sends birthday wishes to your mother." I chuckled softly. Dorsey never spoke superfluously. He knew. I set a reminder, packed my things. No uniform. Just a simple navy blue dress, high neck, mid-length sleeves. Low heels steady enough to walk firmly. Hair pinned up. A muted pink lipstick, not too faint, not too bold. I wasn't going to unsettle anyone. But I wasn't going to fade into the wallpaper either. Cypress Grove was an upscale restaurant in Boston's suburbs. I arrived on time, not early, not late. The host called my name immediately, no double-checking. They'd been informed. When I entered the private dining room, the family nearly filled the long table. Candlelight reflected off crystal glasses, white tablecloths, roses arranged minimally down the center. Everything was elegant, meticulously planned, like a small gala. Delilah saw me first. She stood, gave a light hug on both shoulders, air-kissed one cheek. "Well, you still remember the way home. Busy with your top-secret missions, huh?" I gave a faint smile. "Classified schedule." "But you're lucky today." She laughed a bit too loudly, turning to announce Nora's here, everyone. She's paused, saving the world to join us. Laughter rippled. Not too loud, but enough to create a disjointed beat in the air. I walked to my assigned seat near the table's end, next to a cousin's boyfriend. The chair beside me was empty. Dinner began. Conversations revolved around real estate schools, upcoming vacations. I stayed quiet, listened, nodded when needed. No one asked me anything. When the main course was served, a waiter approached, heading toward Delilah, but stopped at me. "Excuse me, Ms. Nora Callahan. Someone's waiting for you in the lobby regarding a scheduled delivery." Delilah raised an eyebrow. "Delivery? What, getting another medal? Or did someone send surprise flowers?" I set my napkin down, voice calm. "Just work documents. I'll be back." I stood, walked out of the room. The lobby was brighter, quieter. Lieutenant Reyes stood tall in his flight uniform, holding a thick envelope, his expression serious, but not tense. He saluted formally Lieutenant Colonel Callahan. "Documents delivered per General Dorsey's direct order. He sends his respects." I returned a precise salute. Our eyes met for a second, just enough to know we were performing a ritual not for ourselves, but for those who'd never seen. I took the documents, nodded. "Thank you, Lieutenant. Well done. You're dismissed." Yes, ma'am. I turned, slowing my pace as I walked back through the hallway to the dining room. I didn't need to look to know the door was ajar, and eyes inside were watching. I walked through posture, straight documents tucked at my side. Reyes stood at attention behind me until I was out of sight, then left. No explanation was needed. Everything was said through presence. I returned to my seat, placed the documents in my bag, poured water, smiled, sorry for the interruption. This dish has truffle sauce, right? Smells amazing. No one spoke. A strange silence crept into the once noisy air. Delilah glanced at me, then away. Mom adjusted her napkin. Dad lifted his wine glass, though it was empty. And I knew something had shifted. Not because they understood me more, but because for the first time they couldn't ignore me. Have you ever seen a crowded room fall silent just because of one unexpected act? Some reversals don't need shouting, just the right person, the right moment, the right look. If you've ever dreamed of being seen, not through praise, but through true respect, step into this chapter with me. And if this story feels familiar, don't forget to hit follow. I sat back down after receiving the documents from Lieutenant Reyes just minutes ago. No one touched their forks. The main course still steamed, but no one remembered its taste. No one said a word. I lifted my glass, took a small sip. Barely audible, but in that thick silence, even the water hitting the ice seemed to echo. Delilah, 4 seats away, twirled her wine glass, but didn't drink. Mom sat upright, hands on her napkin, her eyes meeting mine before darting away. Dad stared into his empty glass as if searching for invisible words at the bottom. No one spoke. Not because they had nothing to say, but because no one knew where to begin. An Air Force officer walked in mid-family dinner, saluted me in front of everyone, called me Lieutenant Colonel Callahan. Clearly, formally, directly. And in that moment, I wasn't the enigmatic younger sister. Not the one absent from family photos. Not the name misspelled on invitations. I was a lieutenant colonel, the one saluted in a military ritual. Delilah broke the heavy silence first. Well, that was impressive. Who salutes in a restaurant like something out of Hollywood? She laughed, but it wavered, breaking at the end. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Truth doesn't need explaining. It just needs to be seen. My uncle, silent until now, spoke up. You're really a lieutenant colonel. I turned, nodded lightly. Yes, sir. Active duty Air Force. He nodded slowly as if learning a new word in a foreign tongue. I wasn't surprised. For years, no one in the family asked what I actually did. All they knew was I did something with flying, and I didn't correct them. Because if someone doesn't want to know, explaining only pushes you further away. The atmosphere moved sluggishly, like sediment settling. Every glance, every small gesture carried a strange caution, as if everyone realized they were sitting with someone they didn't truly know. Mom spoke, her voice soft as a breeze. Why didn't you tell us about this? I didn't know you reached that rank. I set my glass down, not raising my voice, just clear, because you never asked. The words weren't sharp. They were just true. But their simplicity cut deepest. Delilah jumped in. You act like we deliberately ignored you. Everyone has their own lives. No one forced you to stay quiet. You chose that. I looked at her, not angry, not pitying. No one forced me to be seen. But no one stopped you from asking either. Have you ever asked silence? No one spoke. A young cousin shifted in their chair. Someone poured themselves water. I continued slowly. I don't blame anyone. But I'm done shrinking myself. If my presence makes the air heavy, maybe the problem isn't me. Dad spoke then, his voice rough, hesitant. I just didn't think you'd gone that far. I turned to him. A brief moment. Then I said, I've always gone far. You just never looked. Mom inhaled, but said nothing. She dabbed her napkin at the corner of her eye as if dust had flown in. No one touched the 3-tiered cake, with edible gold leaf still pristine on the side table. I sat upright, not defensively, but because I no longer felt the need to shrink. When the dinner wound down, I stood, gave a slight nod. Thank you for the meal. I have to leave early for a new training cycle. Delilah asked for the first time without a trace of mockery. "Where are you going this time?" I answered, "Can't say, but it's far. And high. Very high." I walked down the hallway, my bag heavier, not from physical weight, but from what I carried, a quiet shift irreversible. And I knew for the first time I wasn't leaving, feeling pushed out. I was leaving with the posture I chose. Some love isn't spoken aloud. Some letters are never sent, but carry a lifetime within them. If you've ever wished a silent family member would one day speak from the heart, this chapter is for you. And if you see yourself in this story, hit follow. Because we're not just telling stories, we're hearing the unspoken. About 2 weeks after Mom's birthday, I received a small package at the base. No clear sender, just slanted handwriting I recognized immediately Dad's. A brown envelope, edges slightly worn. The front read, "To Nora, personal." I opened it in my office as afternoon sunlight slanted through the window. Outside, I heard the footsteps of trainees preparing for a simulation test. Everything was on schedule, orderly, except my heart, which skipped a beat. Inside was a folded sheet of paper. No header, no date, but the first line stole my breath, "Dear daughter. I'm not sure this letter will reach you, and if it does, it's probably because of your mother, or..." I mustered enough courage to send it. I sat down, feeling pinned by an unnamed weight. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, but each word paused as if carefully chosen. "I'm not good at talking. You know that. Since you were little, I've been the guy behind the newspaper more than the one asking questions. But not because I didn't care. Because I was afraid of saying the wrong thing. I'm the kind of person who, when they love someone too much, steps back instead." I swallowed, my eyes glued to the page. "I've always followed you in my own way. Since your first summer training camp. I still have the letter you left listing your schedule day by day. I thought, this girl will really do what she says. When your mom said you got your pilot's license, I didn't say anything. But that day, I went to a photo shop and printed a picture of you at the airport. I keep it in my wallet in the cash slot. Not to show off, but to carry with me." I froze at that line. For so many years, I thought I was the only one carrying my own image as proof of existence. "I don't know how to ask about your flights, your rank, your missions. Partly because I don't understand. Partly because I was afraid if I asked you'd tell and I wouldn't know what to say. But I read. Every time there's news about your unit, I read it more carefully than any other article. I saw you on the Air Force website last year. No one told me, but I found it. And I saved that article on my computer. I didn't send it to you because I thought if you didn't share it first, maybe you didn't want me to see. Now I know sometimes silence isn't respect, it's avoidance." I closed my eyes. The room around me stayed still, but inside something cracked open softly, and a part of me had waited for this my whole life. "I wrote this letter a few days before your mom's birthday. I didn't know if you'd come. But if you did, I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you. No uniform or ceremony needed. Just know you've become the person you chose to be. I've seen it, for a long time. I just never said it. If you're reading this, it means I found the courage. And if not, know it exists. Like my love. Clumsy but real. Dad." I folded the letter, my hands trembling slightly. No tears. Just a heavy feeling dissolving like someone had lifted a sandbag off my chest. Maybe love doesn't need perfect timing to matter. It just needs to be real. That afternoon, I went to the runway, sat on the steps of a training jet, grounded since morning. I held the letter, looked at the open sky above, and thought of Dad with his worn wallet that might have frayed at the edges, but still carried his daughter's photo from years ago. I thought he hadn't seen me. But he had. In his own quiet, wordless way, he'd seen me. That night, I sent Dad a short email. "Thank you for the letter. I read it and I understand. Nothing more needed. Just know I carry you with me too, every time I fly through unfamiliar skies." No reply came, but the next morning when I checked my phone, there was a simple message. "Your sky is beautiful. Be careful. There are still people on the ground watching. Some people arrive late to understanding you, but sometimes late is better than never. If you've ever wished a family member would finally see you with honest eyes, read this chapter to the end. And if this isn't just my story, hit follow. Because maybe one day someone will sit in the front row for you." That year's recognition ceremony was held at the southern base, where I'd just completed a nearly 9-month tactical training phase. It wasn't a grand public event, just an internal Air Force ceremony, where a few officers were honored for contributions to the NATO program. I didn't think much of it. My name was fourth on the speaker list among colleagues I respected. That morning, I wore my dress uniform hair, neatly pinned, name tag, checked shoes, polished. Routine. Until I stepped onto the podium, looked down at the front row, and saw Mom. She sat upright in a gray dress, a thin wool cardigan, hands on her lap. No heavy makeup, no flashy jewelry, but unmistakable. It was my mother. I faltered for a beat. Not long enough to show to the room, but enough for my heart to skip between beats. I hadn't been told. No text, no call, no email. Yet she was there. She'd flown over 1,000 miles from Boston, sitting among uniforms, not knowing what to say. Her eyes met mine. No blinking, no looking away. And in that moment, I saw her eyes glisten. Mom was crying. Not sobbing, not tears streaming. Just a shimmering look ready to break. A silent emotion. Undeniable. I gave my short speech. About the team, the training, how no one does this alone. My voice was steady because that's the job, but behind the standard words, my heart wasn't following protocol. When the ceremony ended, I was ushered to the reception area for flowers and commendation documents. I hadn't seen Mom yet. Part of me thought she might have left right after. Part of me knew, if she came, she wouldn't leave without saying something. I walked back to the hallway where soft light filtered through frosted glass, and there she was alone, holding a small bag, eyes following me. I approached, saying nothing, just looking. She smiled. Not the family photo smile, but a small, real, gentle one, like I'm learning. And then she said, "This time I won't let the photo get buried under mail." I stood still. No words needed right then, because that was enough. She opened her bag, pulled out a freshly printed photo. It was me receiving my commendation that morning, taken from afar. Someone had helped her print it. She handed it to me. I asked for this copy, to put on the fridge. But this time in the center, not the edge. I took it. My eyes stung, I don't know why. Not because of the photo, but because of where it would go. We sat together in a small cafe outside the base. She ordered tea. I got black iced coffee. No one rushed. Mom said, "Your dad told me to go." He said, "It's your turn." I smiled lightly. A warmth spread through my chest. "I thought you didn't know how to fly long distances alone." She shrugged. "I didn't before. But if I don't start learning, when will I ever understand you?" We didn't revisit the past. We didn't need to. Everything that needed understanding was in the other's eyes. When we parted, she hugged me longer than usual, and before getting in her car, she said, "Don't think I'm not proud. I was just afraid I wasn't good enough to say it. But I've started learning, and I won't stop." That night, I returned to my room. On the table was the printed photo. I took a piece of tape, stuck it to the corner of my personal locker in the command room. But before I did, I wrote on the back, "For the mother who learned to see her daughter with new eyes." I didn't need Mom to become someone else. I just needed her to try understanding me with real love. And that day she began. Some people enter your life as challenges. They make you doubt yourself, shrink, then fight to exist. But sometimes those same people, when they drop their masks, are the first to see you clearly. If you've been hurt by someone close, this chapter might not be easy, but I believe you'll understand. And if you've come this far, don't forget to hit follow, because what's coming isn't just an ending, it's a beginning. I got no heads up, no email, no text. Just that morning, while guiding trainees through a simulator check, a tech assistant called Lieutenant Colonel. "There's a visitor at the front gate. Says they're family." I frowned. Dad couldn't be here. Mom called last night. Who comes to a base on a random Tuesday? I walked briskly to the reception area, curious but cautious. And there she was, Delilah, standing in the lobby holding her young son's shoulders, her eyes lost among the uniforms and steel hallways. She wore a white blouse, jeans, loose hair, minimal makeup. Different. Not Instagram Delilah. Just my sister, real. I stopped a few steps away. "What are you doing here?" She smiled, a bit shaky. "I had a work trip nearby. Brought Ben along. And I thought, could I see where you work? Ben keeps talking about how Aunt Nora flies planes." The boy looked at me, eyes sparkling. "Mom says you fly like a superhero." I knelt, smiled, not like a superhero, like someone who knows what they're doing. I led them through the glass hallway overlooking the runway and maintenance area. A group of officers passed, saw me, and snapped to attention. "Good morning, Lieutenant Colonel Callahan." I nodded back. Delilah turned to me, eyes wide, unsure how to react. She whispered, "They actually salute you, like in movies." I said softly, "Not like movies. It's protocol. And respect." I took them to the simulator cockpit area. Ben got to sit in a pilot seat. I explained the controls, narrating through the mic so he could imagine taking off. He laughed, shouting Aunt Nora's a real commander. Delilah stood nearby watching me work. For the first time, no quips, no judging looks. Just a woman seeing her sister in a world she'd never entered. After the tour, I invited them to a private lounge. Delilah sat, exhaled softly. The air felt lighter. "I used to think your job was distant, like something people talk about to sound impressive. But now I get it. You're really here. You're part of this place." I stayed quiet. She continued, "I know I haven't been easy. You thought I hated you, didn't you?" I met her eyes. "No. I thought you didn't know how to love me the way I needed." She looked down. Then, unexpectedly, her voice broke. I was jealous. "For a long time. You dared to live what you believed in. I never did. I chose the life everyone called stable proper, but it always felt lacking. Then I saw you not needing anyone's praise, still moving forward. I hated that. But now, I don't. I just wish I'd been as brave as you." I didn't answer right away. I poured water for both of us. The room was quiet for a few seconds, but not heavy. "No one's born strong, Delilah. I'm not better than you. I was just tired of not being myself, so I chose another way." "But if you're starting to look at yourself, that's already brave." She looked up, eyes wet. She laughed through a breath I came to show Ben planes. Turns out, I'm the one who learned something. Ben was asleep in the corner, clutching a plastic plane model I'd given him. I looked at them both, seeing something I hadn't dared imagine, Delilah stripped of her facade, becoming real. Before they left, she hugged me. Not the usual air kiss. She whispered, "If I want to start over, is there room for me?" I nodded. "As long as you mean it. I'll always have room." That night, I opened my personal email. A new message from Delilah. "Thanks for not shutting the door. You made me want to look at myself again. And for the first time, I don't need to be better than anyone, just not lose myself. See you soon. Not at a party, but where you truly belongs. Some changes don't need fanfare. No fireworks or declarations. Just a chair pulled closer to the center. A nod without force. And a silence that finally doesn't mean distance. If you've waited for a meal to heal years of coldness, this chapter is yours. And if it hasn't come yet, don't worry. It might start with just a glass of water. That Lunar New Year." I went home, not out of obligation, but as a choice. I'd lived long enough in my own world to know if I chose to return, it was to face, not to prove. The house was the same white brick in Boston suburbs, pale blue shutters, the front yard pine replaced by a magnolia. I pulled into the driveway near noon snow, still dusting the ground, but sunlight slanting through the branches. Delilah opened the door. Not Mom, not Dad. My sister, in a loose gray sweater hair, simply tied her eyes. Softer than before. "You're here," she said. No flourish, no sarcasm. Just real. The New Year's meal was in the main dining room. The long table was the same. But unlike past years, I wasn't assigned to the end. My seat was near the center, right next to Dad. Delilah poured water for me, then Mom. When I thanked her, she just smiled. "You're the guest of honor this year." I laughed. The joke had no edge. It was like an old shell peeled off and burned away. The family was all there. Aunts, uncles, distant relatives, kids grown taller than I remembered. But no one asked the usuals, "Where are you working?" "Anyone special? When are you settling down?" Instead, when I talked about a Polish female instructor, the first to let me fly a fighter jet model at high altitude, they listened. No interruptions, no jokes. Mom sat across fingers, tracing her napkin's edge. Suddenly she stood, went to the living room, and returned with a small frame. She placed it in the table's center. It was me receiving my commendation last year, standing tall, holding my unit's flag sunlight at my back. No one spoke, but the photo was there, in the middle, where every eye had to pass at least once. I looked at Mom. She didn't explain, just said softly, "This year I want everyone to know you're not on the sidelines. You're part of the center. You have been for a long time. It just took me a while to see." Dad nodded. Nothing more needed. The kids later clamored to ask about planes. I sketched a simple engine on a napkin, explained lift and wind speed. Delilah watched her eyes bright like a student rediscovering a missed lesson. When I stood to help clear the table, Mom stopped me. "Sit. Today you tell stories, not clean." Next time. It sounded small, but I understood. For years I'd been a shadow in my own family. Today I wasn't. After the meal, Delilah walked me to the porch. The kids were throwing snow in the yard. She said, "I don't know if I can erase the past years. But if you're here every new year, I think I can learn to be real with you. Not for perfection, but because I want to." I touched her arm lightly. "You don't need to apologize. I just need you here, as you." We sat quietly for a moment, watching the kids laugh. Her eyes reddened. But this time I didn't see weakness. I saw someone ready to start again from within. That night I drove away from the house. In the rearview mirror, the yellow lights glowed shadows moving past the windows. I didn't need them to understand everything I'd been through. I just needed them to stop defining me by old memories. And this year they did with a new seat, a small frame, and listening without judgment. Not everyone needs applause. Some just need a look without judgment, a quiet nod, a name said, "Right." Being seen is one thing. Being seen for who you are, that's something else entirely. If you've lived in a silent space where recognition feels like a luxury, this chapter whispers to you. Back at the base after the new year, I stepped off the transport plane with an oddly light stride. Not fully at peace, but something had lifted. I went straight to the operations room. Maps, models, files still neat as I'd left them. But my team was different. They asked about my family dinner not out of curiosity, but sincerity. I smiled, answered briefly. For the first time I sat near the center of the table. No one laughed. They understood. In this world, sometimes a seat at the table says more than a training record. The next morning I led a field training session. New trainees fumbled in sub-zero temperatures with harnesses and combat codes. But they looked at me with the eyes I'd once wished for elsewhere, eyes that didn't care if I was married, partnered, or settling down. Their only question, can I follow this person into battle and come back safe? And when I nodded, they nodded back. No medals were handed out. No celebratory videos. Just the sound of harnesses tightening and my voice over the comm's raise wings. Delta formation. Take position. That night I stayed late in the operations room. On the wall were photos of trainee classes over the years. I stood before one recalling the moment I was first called flight group leader. Not because I was the best, but because I was the calmest. When Engine 3 failed in a drill, I didn't panic. I did what no one taught me before trusted myself. I remembered that feeling. Not pride, but being entrusted, not having to beg for it. I thought for years I spent too much energy hoping a few people out there would understand. But it turns out value isn't in what they understand. It's in no longer needing them to understand me. One day, a young officer approached me after training. Nervous, she asked, "Ma'am, if I may, how do you live when you feel no one understands who you are, or why you chose this?" I looked at her, saw myself in her glistening eyes. I said, "First stop trying to make them understand. Instead, live so that even if they don't, you never doubt your choice." She nodded, said nothing more. But her eyes were less lost. That night I lay in my private room, a space few knew. No photos, no personal decor. Just a window overlooking the runway. I thought of a line I wrote in my notebook as a trainee. I don't need them to understand everything I've done. I just hope one day they stop trying to make me someone else. Now I no longer hoped for that, because I'd stopped living as a version someone could accept. I was just me alone at the base or at a New Year's meal. Some say recognition is applause. For me, it's when no one tries to fix my name or says you should try something more stable. Recognition sometimes is just when the person across from you stops trying to translate you into something familiar. As I left the operations room near midnight, the base was eerily quiet. A colleague passing by greeted me. "Good night, Lieutenant Colonel." Early meeting tomorrow, I nodded. No one discussed my rank. No one asked why I wasn't married. They just saw me as a normal part of the system, normal, because I fit, not because I was made to fit. On my desk, I placed an old photo. Me standing next to that Polish instructor years ago. The photo's corner was bent, but the looks in it, mine and hers, were intact, focused, trusting, needing no explanation. Some departures don't need a slammed door, just a deep exhale, a light step. A familiar scene glanced one last time, and knowing you no longer belong to it. Not because you were pushed out, but because you're full enough to walk away. If you've ever thought peace was a luxury, this final chapter is for you. I returned to that house one more time. Not for a party, or because someone was sick, or because I was invited. Just to pass by, stop, and say goodbye properly. Spring was budding. The magnolia in the yard was blooming. Pale pink petals fell slowly onto the stone path. I stood before the white gate, hand hesitating to knock. Just looking through the sheer curtain where a shadow arranged flowers by the window. I didn't expect them to run out and hug me. I didn't wait for someone to say something surprising. I just stood there a while, like standing at a crossroads that once led you astray to bid farewell to your old self. I still remembered that dinner when Lieutenant Reyes appeared in the restaurant saluting me in full military protocol. It wasn't the moment I was seen, but the moment no one could ignore my presence anymore. Delilah might tell that night as a funny story how her sister brought a military scene to dinner and made things awkward. Let her tell it. I wasn't there for applause. I was there for the sky, for the mission, and for the silence. That finally became peace. I didn't hate them. Not anymore. Maybe because I stopped waiting for their praise. Or because my peace no longer depended on a shared meal, or a late apology. I let go, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved a life free from the weight of betrayed expectations. That morning I left the house through the old path. Past the kitchen, the living room where the wooden clock still hung. Mom was napping on the sofa, an open book in her hand. Dad sat by the window, sunlight on his wrinkled forehead. No one saw me leave, and oddly, I was grateful for that. I left a short letter on the table. Not long, not heavy. Just a few lines. I once tried to live as what I thought you needed me to be. Now I've chosen to live as me. Thank you for the times you listened. That's enough. No forgiveness was written, but every word was light. I got in the car, drove toward the base. On the road, I didn't play music, didn't check messages. I just let the wind slip through the cracked window, my hand gliding on the wheel, my heart empty, but not hollow. Some roads you travel to know you won't return. Some relationships need one honest confrontation to realize you don't need to win, just let go. That afternoon, I stood on the command platform watching trainees run simulations. One made a repeated error. I didn't yell, just called them over, asked, "Are you still trying to prove something, or just trying to live what you believe?" They didn't answer. But their next test was better than any before. I looked at the sky, cloud trails streaked like jet marks. I smiled. No need to be celebrated, just to live fully. That night I folded my uniform carefully like the first time it was issued, pinned the worn insignia to the chest, and wrote 2 final lines in my notebook. I don't need to be fully understood. I just need to write my own ending. And today I did. My story isn't a journey to win, but to return to myself whole, complete, and not needing anyone's validation to feel worthy. Through each chapter, I learned love doesn't always need words. Respect doesn't need to be loud and true. Peace comes when you stop trying to be what others expect. If you've ever felt overlooked, fought to be recognized, I hope this story is a quiet handshake, reminding you you're not alone. We don't need to be fully understood to be truly loved. Thank you for listening to this journey from start to finish. If this story touched you, leave a comment with your thoughts, or just a dot to let me know you were here with me. Don't forget to hit follow to keep walking through other stories about quiet strength, unspoken love, and living true to yourself.